I'm so excited to share that this podcast is sponsored by The RealReal, the best place to shop authenticated luxury bags, clothing, watches, and so much more. I'm obsessed with gold bracelets. I just found the most beautiful Fendi bracelet. Now, you can scour The RealReal for new pieces. There are 10,000 new items every day. The RealReal is attainable luxury that upgrades your personal style. With up to 90% off retail, you can finally have the pieces that you've been dreaming of from brands like Gucci, Fendi, and Prada. The RealReal is great for the planet and for your wardrobe. They're finding new homes for over 37 million authenticated luxury items, so they know firsthand the impact that resale has on the planet. And it's the go-to place for your next special piece. Think about all the fun things that you have coming this spring and summer. The RealReal is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. With thousands of new arrivals daily, no one does resale like The RealReal. So now get $25 off your first purchase when you go to therealreal.com/KateCasey. That's therealreal.com/KateCasey to get your $25 off. Start shopping now at therealreal.com/KateCasey. Let's be honest, nothing boosts confidence quite like great hair. But if you're seeing more strands in the shower, your confidence might not be at its highest. That's why you need Hers Hair. Hers Hair treatments are made with doctor-trusted prescription ingredients that many other hair products out there just don't have. They come in a variety of options, including oral and topical solutions, so you can find the one that works for you. Getting started is simple with a quick online hair quiz. Just answer some questions and you will be connected with a provider to discuss your personalized treatment plan. Through Hers, everything is 100% online, so no pharmacy trips, doctor's office visits, or insurance required, and plus, treatments start at just $35 a month. And the best part, you can get thicker, fuller, healthier hair and start seeing regrowth in as little as 3 to 6 months. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/KateCasey. That's FORHERS.com/KateCasey for your personalized hair loss treatment options. forhers.com/KateCasey. Individual results may vary. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. I hope that you have had a fantastic week, and I've got a great episode for you. First, I wanted to talk about 2 Bravo shows. The first part of the Summer House reunion aired this week. And I got to say, the longer the time goes on, the more I realize that nothing happened on Summer House last season. And I understand reunions, it's difficult because you're relitigating arguments that you had a year ago. That show was filmed in the summer of 2024. However, there's still nothing that happened on that show last season. It felt like a nursing home documentary because they're always in bed. They barely left the house. I think you've got to just get rid of all of the cast members that have been on the show way too long because it's just not that interesting when it's the same people that show up every season. It's like the same antics, the same arguments, the same conversations. And the original show idea was brilliant, bringing together people who play hard during the week at their respective jobs, and then they have this share house and they like let it all go. Now the show is about people that are reality stars or influencers who then come and film on the weekend after they film in their respective, homes, apartments, etc. during the week. So I know times have changed, but it's like, it's not as fun as it used to be. Now, I'll also say this. I totally believe Paige. I don't think Craig ever bought a ring. No one spends that much time designing a ring, cultivating a relationship with a jeweler, and spending that much money to just go and return it so quickly. So I'm with her on that one. But listen, again, I've said it before. You don't want to marry someone who's not totally invested into a marriage with you. So the same can be said for other couples on that show. If someone is not totally invested in the idea of marrying you and being your partner for the rest of their life, it's okay to let them go and feel good about it. It's painful in the moment, but I'm telling you, it's going to work out for you in the long run. Now, on The Valley, this is the show that's sort of between Vanderpump Rules and Real Housewives. So you have couples with young children. And I got to tell you, as a parent, sometimes it's hard because you think to yourself, this is so hard right now, and your kids haven't even gotten to middle school yet. Buckle up. Okay, so this week on the Valley, it's centered on Danny's excessive drinking on that last trip to Santa Barbara. He passed out after having a couple drinks. It did seem like they were saying he was chugging tequila in a pantry. And I have to say, if you're chugging tequila in a pantry, you really got to ask yourself what's going on. Now, some would say, this is a guy with young kids. He's a dad that's a little excited to get some adult free time, and he overshot it. Fine. However, they know him much better than we do. And Jasmine in particular is like, listen, sometimes he says inappropriate stuff. He's a little handsy and it's a little weird. And she recounted a couple incidents where his intoxication made her feel uncomfortable. They end up having a conversation on screen. I'm glad they did so. What I find interesting is that in the last episode, his wife Nia shared a deeply personal revelation about her past experiences when she was a child when they were homeless. They had to live in shelters and even in her car. She emphasized in that scene that these hardships had shaped her resilience and commitment to positivity. And I'm asking all of you to think about, if you were in the same conversation with someone, would they phrase it that way? And I say that because we know that she spent the duration of pretty much her older childhood and young adulthood in pageants. And that's when someone's communication style is always perplexing to me. Now, what you need to know is that on Watch What Happens Live, Andy questioned Janet, also on the cast, about publicly revealing Nia's attendance at Al-Anon meetings, which are meant to be anonymous. Totally shitty. Also, Jasmine said on the Valley After Show that she believes that Nia may have had ulterior motives when it came to opening up to the cast about what happened in her childhood. She said, I felt bad that she had to go there to open up to us. But at the same time, I felt like this is why you put on this facade that you're so perfect sometimes. This is so sad to say this, but it made me feel like as if she's saying like, hey guys, I'm going to tell you that I was homeless, so now you can't get mad at me. And Brittany, who was also there, felt like it felt a little bit rehearsed. Janet said, I just felt like because of my past, I hide things. I understand I'm hiding things, but that's how I've dealt with things. But she never really made that connection. It was just kind of like, you guys shouldn't be doing anything to upset me because I've had a really rough childhood and upbringing. And to me, it did feel like trying to gain sympathy in that moment. So you have a couple people that kind of feel the same way. I feel like what they're trying to say is, you present yourself as so perfect and you've got this like perfect little life, and no one believes that anyone's life is perfect. And the fact that you were in pageants all these years, it feels like things are almost like you've been media trained your entire life to say the thing that you think will make you look better or move the conversation along. And that makes us not think that you're very authentic. So that I found pretty interesting, because how many times do you run in your social circles with somebody who is in a pageant? I'm going to go with probably never. So that's the way I think. If I'm at a party and I find out somebody was in pageants, they were like Miss USA, I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, how do they communicate? How do they walk through life? What's the lens through which they look at? And that is what I find interesting about Nia and Danny. So it's going to be interesting how that kind of plays along. And also the reality that they will soon have, because we know she's about to have a baby, 4 kids. And I say this as somebody with a lot of kids. When you're friends with somebody who maybe only has one, there is a sort of natural divide, because your lives, even though you both have children, they kind of go in separate ways. And really strong friendships, it's not a big deal. But others, it doesn't. And if they're only friends because of this show, you'll see the cracks, and you'll see it soon. And lastly, I want to say, Jax and Brittany. Now, I understand the income that the show makes. But in the long run, will they be happy that they filmed this show during such a hectic period of their lives? Like, he has really bad addiction issues. He's like making videos while he's at rehab, presumably so that he can still be included in an episode, which is a whole other addiction to fame thing that we haven't even touched on. And she's sharing he hasn't paid the mortgage. They have a child with special needs. It's clearly overwhelmingly stressful for her. And I just wonder if they're in reflection years later going to go, maybe we shouldn't have filmed a show during this really painful point of their lives. Now, they may say, I'm glad that the cameras were there because I didn't keep the secrets. I let it go. But it's going to be interesting, like 10, 15, 20 years from now, to go back to a lot of these reality stars and ask them, like, in hindsight, do you think it was the best thing for you to be filming during those different points of your life? So that's what I find really interesting right now on the Valley. So you can watch that on Bravo, and I highly recommend it. So today we're going to go back and dive into one of the most closely watched trials in recent memory, the federal case against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Now, if you go back in time, you remember watching Making the Band. I feel like we were witness to the chaos of this man's life and just how diabolical he could be. And watching this trial play out has been endlessly fascinating. So joining me once again is David Weinstein, a seasoned litigator with Jones Walker and a former federal prosecutor. He previously joined us right after opening statements to break down the legal stakes and the courtroom dynamics. And I've asked him to come back today to help us unpack what has happened since those opening statements and where the trial may be headed next. So to recap, Sean Combs, also called Diddy, is facing federal charges, including sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and transportation for prostitution. Prosecutors allege that over the course of nearly 2 decades, he operated a criminal enterprise that used threats, drugs, and coercion to exploit women and silence his accusers. Since our last conversation, the trial has taken a dramatic turn. Key witnesses have testified, including singer Cassie Ventura, who described a decade of abuse, and rapper Kid Cudi, who detailed a firebombing attempt on his car allegedly tied to Sean Combs. So more than 15 witnesses so far have given disturbing accounts of violence, coercion, and manipulation. And a judge recently denied the defense's motion for a mistrial, and another alleged victim, known as Only as Mia, is expected to take the stand next. So here is my interview with David. Summer's just around the corner, and the folks at Mint Mobile have a hot take. Getting a summer bod is out, and getting your savings bod is in. This spring and summer, we want skimpy wireless bills and fat wallets. And with premium wireless plans for just $15 a month, you can have both without breaking a sweat or the bank. And let me tell you, the quality of Mint Mobile's wireless service in comparison to my old provider is mint. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans at mintmobile.com/realitylife. That's mintmobile.com/realitylife. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Summer's almost here. It is my most favorite time of the year, and there's no better place to go for outdoor furniture than Wayfair. Wayfair's huge selection of outdoor essentials will help make your outdoor space more comfortable, functional, and most importantly, more you. Wayfair has all things outdoor and at unbelievable prices. So don't wait until summer's in full swing. You've got to get your outdoor space ready today so you can enjoy it all season long. I just love the look of white wicker in a backyard, and then to spruce it up with some blue or yellow pillows. Wayfair really has everything that you and I both need. Outdoor dining tables and sets, umbrellas, dining chairs, bar stools, grills, outdoor bars, even tableware. Their huge selection of home items makes it easy to find exactly what's right for you. And I gotta tell you, my favorite part, it is free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff. So no more huge delivery fees for patio furniture. You can get big stuff like patio sets, gazebos, hot tubs, and more shipped free. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. David, what a day in court. Lots of updates in this case. The last we spoke, it was just shortly after the opening statements, and a lot has happened since then. So I guess the first question I have for you is about this mistrial motion being denied. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm surprised it took them this long, the defense that is, to file a motion for mistrial. Usually you'll get peppered with one about each week based on a statement that a witness has made that they believe has prejudiced the jury. Now, the whole issue that came up with this motion for the mistrial was to do with fingerprint cards and the bombing of the car, questions whether or not it was really a Molotov cocktail, whether Sean was behind it, whether it was somebody else. They called into question whether there was perhaps another woman who was involved, given the fact that the bottle was a aftershave bottle and a designer scarf that was used to, be the igniter. And they were questioning whether the LAPD had really conducted a thorough examination of what was going on. And so there was an issue with the destruction of the fingerprint cards. And so the prosecutor asked the question of one of the witnesses about why these cards had been destroyed. And the defense was all over it because, remember, there's an obstruction charge that's contained in this racketeering conspiracy. And other witnesses, and certainly some of the jurors during jury selection, had made a statement that they felt that Sean Combs could buy off anybody here. So the inference the defense was drawing was that the prosecution intentionally asked the question. It was intended to prejudice the jurors against Sean Combs because they felt that he was the one who has orchestrated this. The prosecution's comeback was, well, no, we were anticipating that you were going to attack sloppy police work, that they hadn't really investigated this. And so that's why we asked the question. The judge ruled no reason to grant a mistrial based on that. He felt that the rest of the evidence was overwhelming, but he did direct that statement be stricken from the record, which is often the case, but it also draws attention to the statement that was made.
So how does the defense's strategy move forward?
They keep moving forward the same way they've been moving forward. We saw some examples of that today. The stylist who was on the stand, they poked at him. They said, well, weren't you also using drugs around when this happened? Didn't that cause your memory perhaps to falter? He had to admit that he had to cut short a debriefing he was having with the prosecutors because he had gotten high earlier in the day. So that causes them to then be able to say to the jury, well, you heard from a witness. Can you really rely on his memory? Is that actually what he saw happening? And they also used this particular witness to support their theory that Combs may have had some bad traits and qualities to him, but he was not always acting out against the other people involved, and that perhaps some of these people were egging him on and getting him to react more violently. One of the snippets of testimony from today involved this particular witness having to jump on Sean's back, and it was to more, in the witness's words, protect Sean himself and not necessarily the witness. So the defense continues to use the cross-examination to poke holes in the testimony and to bolster up their theory, which is he's a bad guy. He may have done some bad things, but not what he's accused of doing.
Let's talk about Cassie Ventura's testimony. She testified over 4 days, alleged a decade of abuse. She described being subjected to violence, threats, and coercion. She also testified that he used an alias, Frank Black, to obtain drugs, and that he orchestrated drug-fueled sexual encounters referred to as freak-offs. So she's testified that he used that alias to obtain drugs for the freak-offs. How might prosecutors link that behavior to the trafficking and the racketeering charges?
Well, keep in mind that the racketeering charge is one that's been used for decades, originally used against organized crime, and it allows the government to get in all of this extraneous evidence and testimony because they allege these underlying facts as well, not just the main charge, not just the sex trafficking. And so by allowing her to testify that way and showing that he used this alias so nobody would know that it's him as the person who was buying the drugs, that just further fuels the government's proof that it was an organization, that he was trying to hide his identity from people on the outside. Again, one of the charges is obstruction. Well, how could you obstruct an investigation? You could use an alias when you're going out to buy these illegal drugs. The purchase of the drugs themselves are listed as overt acts in the overall racketeering conspiracy. So her testimony that he did exactly that sort of dovetails into the picture that the prosecution painted in the indictment that they filed.
And what were the drugs? I mean, we kind of saw a picture of the pill bottle, but what was the actual prescription for?
was either going to be MDMA or ecstasy or some sort of painkiller, or they use a variety of other relaxants, antidepressants in conjunction with some of these other drugs. But again, suggesting that those types of drugs were used and given to people who participated in the freak-offs to make them docile and subservient to what was going around, again, at the direction of Sean Combs.
Okay. Well, a former personal assistant referred to as Mia is expected to testify about being forced into sexual acts and subjected to coercion and threats by Sean Combs. And her testimony follows that of Cassie's, who also alleged direct sexual misconduct. With Mia expected to testify next, what are the prosecutors likely going to try to establish by sequencing her testimony now? Is this about a pattern or escalation?
It's certainly about a pattern and showing that his behavior continues to be consistent with what they've alleged. And they've also sort of padded these two witnesses with people in between them. There's a general rule that when you're prosecuting a case, you don't put either two victims or two cooperators right up back to back against each other. You try to pad their testimony with other individuals who don't necessarily have the same bias or the incentive to perhaps inflate the truth about what happens. And that's exactly what they did here. They put their first victim on, then they put other testimony in between to both corroborate what the first victim had to say, to establish other predicate acts and other acts that are consistent with this bad actor who they're prosecuting. And so now they put up the second victim. They gave the jurors a little breather between the two victims. And now the second victim is going to testify to similar acts that were testified by victim number one. Again, engaging in sex trafficking, forcing her to engage in sex acts against her control, forcing her to travel to commit them, using drugs, using threats of violence. Again, these are acts that they've alleged in the indictment. And so these are acts they want to prove up to these jurors because that's how they're going to prove their case.
Now, if they were going to prove that he took some of the victims over state or international lines, he does have access to a private jet. He owns his own, probably has access to others. Would they be able to track that down with, like, I don't know, manifests or flight logs?
Absolutely. There's a paper trail. Even with a private jet, you have to file flight plans. There are also records that are kept by the FAA. There are flight tracking records that exist. And so they will seek to introduce testimony by the way of record evidence that shows that this is the manifest for this particular flight. And within those manifests, you have to list who the passengers are on the planes. And so that's a way for them to both establish that there was movement over state lines, as well as to corroborate the testimony of these witnesses. So obviously much easier if it's a commercial air flight. You send a subpoena to one of the airlines and you say, here, show us the tickets that were purchased and they were used by this individual. Not so much so with a private jet, but you still have to keep those logs. And if you own a private jet, those logs are part of what you have to have on board the plane so that you're in compliance and you can keep flying the private jet with the tail number that's registered with the FAA. So that's how they're going to tie in this travel over state lines, even if a private jet was used.
Do people, in your experience or any suits that you've come across, skirt this? Like, do they get away with traveling over state or international lines and not fully logging all the information?
Absolutely. I've seen it happen all the time, both in cases that I prosecuted and in cases where I've had a client who's had their plane seized. And they're looking at the log records and they're going, well, wait a minute, you're missing things here. You only said that you had 2 passengers on the plane. We have proof you had 4. Where's the information on the other passengers on the plane? So sure, of course, these are records that are maintained and kept by the owners of the planes. Now, look, they're also kept by their pilots. Their pilots are presumably hired and paid by them, so they're going to do what they're asked. But those pilots like to keep their license. So for the most part, pilots keep accurate record books.
And there's a possibility that maybe they would be subpoenaed, I would assume. Absolutely.
If you can't get it in through the records, you bring a pilot on. Now, then you've got a pilot who's going to have to rely on their recollection of who was on the plane that day. If it's someone who's of notoriety, it's a lot easier to remember, oh yeah, I remember so-and-so, they were on the plane, because you see them all the time. Other times their memory is just as faulty as anybody else's memory.
When I put together my bag each day, I need the essentials, my wallet, my keys, and I also need my liquid IV, which is helping me stay hydrated throughout the whole day. You can break the mold and own your own ritual with just 1 stick and 16 ounces of water, which hydrates better than water alone. Powered by Hydroscience, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration, 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. And I gotta tell you, the best flavors. You have a multitude of flavors, acai berry and lemon lime to pina colada, or you can choose from their line of sugar-free flavors like raspberry lemonade, white peach, and rainbow sherbet. Get ready for a long day with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Kate Casey at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code Kate Casey at liquidiv.com. So I'm one of those moms now who has a daughter that loves to wear her clothes as well. That's why I love to shop at Revolve, because my daughter and I can both find great stuff. Over 1,200 brands and 100,000 styles across high-end, emerging, and exclusive labels in fashion, beauty, and in home goods. You're going to have the most popular brands like Lovers and Friends, Amanda Uprichard, Norma Kamali, A. Goldie, and Michael Costello. Authentic, high-quality products. New arrivals come daily. Inclusive sizing options, personalized product recommendations based on your purchase history. Revolve has it all. I just ordered Mia a beautiful more to come maxi dress and gold sandals for a graduation party in June, and I can't wait to start ordering clothes for all of the fun parties that I'm going to go to. From last-minute getaways to party dressing and seasonal upgrades, Revolve has you covered with fast, 2-day shipping and easy returns, all of them. And for a limited time, you can shop a curated selection of my favorite styles at revolve.com/KateCasey, and you can receive 15% off your first order with the code KateCasey. That's revolve.com/KateCasey to shop my top picks and get 15% off your first order with code KateCasey. Offer is only valid for a limited time, so don't miss out. How do you think the defense is handling the credibility attacks on former employees and alleged victims? Do you think that they're scoring points, or do you think that the testimony is resonating with the jury?
I think that they are scoring some points. I think that the points that they're scoring may be smaller points. They're, I hate to correlate this with prize fighting, but, if you're looking at 2 boxers here, they're getting hits in, they're getting jabs in. Overall, at the end of the round, the prosecution's probably getting more hits in than they're getting in, but they're doing some damages to some of these witnesses. And that's what's to be expected. Whether or not the jurors are going to say, well, that witness was so damaged, I'm not going to believe a word that they said, versus, well, we expected that. Look who they're hanging out with. Look what they're doing. Look what the accusations are. We would be more shocked if they didn't admit to some of this bad acts on their own part, because then we'd know they'd be lying.
We've seen high-profile defense teams try to undercut emotional testimony with procedural or evidentiary objections. Is that happening here, and do you think it's effective?
I haven't seen it as reported happen as much here. Again, sometimes it is very effective, and it keeps out a large amount of testimony that just shouldn't be coming in, either by moving to exclude a witness as an entirety based on the fact that it's just not fitting within a prior bad act witness. It's focusing too much on the prior bad act and has nothing to do with the potential crime that's being charged in the current indictment, or excluding parts of the testimony based on rulings that the court's made before as to what the witness can or can't testify about. I don't know that in this particular case, that's a move that we're going to see as aggressively as we've seen in some other cases. Again, simply because part of what the defense is that none of these people are angels. Our client's not an angel. We've already admitted that to you. And the people who are testifying about him, they're not angels either. Put aside what they're saying about our client. They've done some pretty bad things. And if you try to object too much and exclude too much of their testimony, the jury begins to wonder, well, what are you trying to hide from us? Why not just let them tell it for what it is?
Mm-hmm. Now, again, just to go back to a question from the first time we spoke, what does it mean that this trial includes elements of sex trafficking under RICO laws? How unusual is that in a celebrity case?
Well, I think that it's unusual in a celebrity case because normally in the cases we've seen before, it's just been straight up charges of either sex trafficking or underage minors or violations of what they call the Mann Act. Those are standalones. In this one, because they wanted to introduce so many other prior bad acts about what's going on, that's why they charge it as this racketeering conspiracy. It's traditionally used against organized crime. And the way it works effectively for the government, it allows them to show not just the specific act that they're charging here, which would be the sex trafficking, but it lets them show these other things that the defendant is doing in order to facilitate the sex trafficking. And so here, they're talking about obstruction of justice. They're talking about coercion. They're talking about threats of physical violence. They're talking about arson. They're talking about other crimes that are tied in and that allow them to paint a really bad picture of the bad actor. And again, they started using this back in the 60s against more traditional organized crime. And so they're doing some of that here to paint not just the sex trafficking act, but to include all these extraneous acts that are coming in to paint him out to be a really bad actor.
Last two questions. What could a conviction on these federal charges mean for him financially and in terms of past civil settlements? Could this be reopened?
Whatever he settled in the past with regard to civil settlements, those are closed, they're done. Some of them are confidential, others have been settled. And part of settling something is it's closed and it's done, because otherwise people would just keep suing you and reopening it. In terms of financial setbacks for him, there are penalties, there's forfeitures that they're seeking to get in terms of money that he's obtained throughout the use of some of these acts, others that he facilitated it with. So there's going to be some forfeitures that are going to come up. And then a conviction is going to carry a fine. So that's going to set him back in terms of money that he's going to owe to the government based on the conviction.
Mm-hmm. And then given what we've seen so far, how likely is it that he could take this stand himself? And would that be risky if he did?
It's very risky. Look, the one thing you can't control with a client, you can prep them all you want. You can tell them not to lose their cool. You can tell them to just stick to answering the questions. But once they get up on the stand, you can't stop what it is that they have to say. And given the nature of the way that they've painted him, his violent character, his ability to lose his cool, I think the chances are very slim that you're going to actually see him get on the stand. I think they're going to be content to rely upon their cross-examination to poke holes in what has taken place here. Ultimately, it's the client's decision. There will come a time when the judge asks him point blank, now's your time. I've been advised by your lawyers that you don't want to testify. Is that your choice? If it is, you have to let me know. And if he decides, you know what, I don't care what they said to me, I want to get up on the stand, I want to prove to them that I didn't do anything wrong, then he's going to say, no, it's not my choice. And then he's going to get on the stand. But the problem with that is that his lawyers will essentially have to sort of wind him up and let him testify. If they anticipate even for a moment that he's going to perjure himself and answer a question either on direct or cross-examination with a lie, they can't help him do that. So if that's the case and he doesn't follow their advice, which I really think they'll tell him to stay off the stand, he's just going to hurt himself, because any chance of victory he's had, he's going to just drag it out by getting up there. Then they'll have to essentially put up on the stand and say, okay, Sean, tell everybody what happened in your own words. And then he'll just go on and testify.
I have to say, as someone who reads through all the news reports just like yourself, with the exception that you're the litigator, I thought before this all began that this would be some sort of slam dunk situation. It does not seem to be that way. Are you feeling similarly?
It's never a slam dunk. I mean, in a case like this where you are relying a lot about witness testimony and not just records. Again, we talked about records. Those help corroborate what the witnesses have to say. Flight manifests and records, hotel records, the video they have as to what happened when he was in the elevator and in the hallway, things like that, hard to cross-examine. But just a pure witness, a witness who has motive, a witness who's settled a prior civil lawsuit, maybe they're not being straight up with all of this. Maybe they were bad actors to begin with. And then because this is a RICO conspiracy and the government has to prove certain procedural acts and certain overt acts as part of the conspiracy, it's not open and shut. Look, during the course of a trial, prosecution always thinks they're going to win. Defense always thinks they have a great shot at it. But we're all getting a glimpse into it. It's by report from people who are reporting what's going on in the trial. But you're right. At first, you figured with all these witnesses and all this evidence, it was going to be a slam dunk and over. Not so much so. That's why our system works. That's why 12 people have to decide whether or not the government's met their burden of proof. And it's a high standard. And so until the jury comes back and they give us their verdict, it's not an open and shut case.
Any last thoughts or things that we should look for as the trial continues?
Well, now we've reached the end of May almost. It's going to stretch into June. There'll be a couple of breaks for holidays in June. I think the government estimated that the case would take about 6 weeks to 2 months to take place. So now everybody's starting to look at, we're at least at the halfway point. How much more time is there going to be? Certainly the July 4th holiday is looming over everybody's shoulder. I don't think the Juneteenth will have the effect of coming in the midst of when closings might be. But I think that we're going to see the prosecution try and get this case wrapped up and closed by like the second week or so, maybe the third week of June, so that the defense can put their things on and then either take a break, a long one, and let the 4th of July pass and then come back to do the closings after, or try to get this wrapped up and get them out before the 4th of July. You never want to have a big holiday. I know we had to deal with Memorial Day. They didn't have any choice. Mm-hmm. They knew that one was going to come in. But when you get close to the end, you don't want the looming holiday there. It causes jurors to make decisions a little bit faster than you might expect. Sometimes that hurts the prosecution. Sometimes that hurts the defense. But I'm looking for the case to keep moving steadily forward, for them to put long days in, try to get witnesses on and off, and wrap this thing up by sometime in the middle of June with the prosecution's case.
Thank you so much for continuing to keep us updated, and I really appreciate your time and your insight.
You're welcome. I'm always glad to help people understand what goes on inside the courtroom rather than just looking at it and trying to guess why that happened.
Exactly. Well, tell everybody where they can follow you.
You can either find me here in Miami at joneswalker.com, or you can look for me on X at David S. Weinstein.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
I want to thank my fantastic guest, David Weinstein, and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. Join the Facebook group, Reality Life with KKC. Make sure that you get bonus episodes by going to patreon.com/KKC. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. And follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KKCCA, TikTok it's KKC, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at @KKC. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode.
Hey, I'm Mike Corey, the host of Wondery's podcast, Against the Odds. In each episode, we take you to the edge of some of the most incredible adventure and survival stories in history. In our next season, it's 1980, and in the Pacific Northwest, the long-dormant volcano Mount St. Helens is showing signs of life. Scientists warn that a big eruption is coming, but a restricted zone around the mountain is limited by politics. On May 18th, hikers, loggers, reporters, and researchers are caught in the blast zone as the volcano erupts. They find themselves pummeled by a deadly combination of scorching heat, smothering ash, and massive mudslides. The survivors have to find their way to safety before they succumb to their injuries, or face another eruption. Follow Against the Odds on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. Binge the entire season ad-free right now only on Wondery Plus. Start your free trial in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify today.